Hello, I am Soon Ki Hong from the Hanmaum Church in Chinchan. I have the best marriage ever because I met a wife who believes in Jesus. I couldn't even dream about getting married because I doubted whether I could have a family with my terrible temper. But I want to share about how I've had a family for the past 11 years that is envied by everyone after I surrendered to the risen Jesus. I am good and tender-hearted by nature, but when I got angry, I couldn't control myself. Of course, when the moment passed, I came back to my normal state. But I faced a lot of difficulties because of my short-tempered personality. My brother lived in Wanju. Then he moved to Suwon. I heard that the landlord of his previous house wouldn't give him back his deposit on time and kept stalling. When I saw my brother talking to the landlord on the phone, I got raging mad. I snatched the phone from my brother and yelled into it, "I am the brother of so-and-so. I just got out of prison. And if you don't give him back the deposit right now, I will go to the school where you work and make trouble. So it's your choice." The landlord was a school teacher, and I sounded so threatening that he gave back the deposit immediately. Things got hard at work because of my short temper. One day I was working in a discount chain store, and I was getting ready to open the store in the morning, but one of the employees came to work late, and the display that should have been completed before the opening time wasn't ready. I got so angry that I threw a box at a wine stand. The store became a mess. If I did such things, I knew there would be damages and consequences for me, but I couldn't control my anger. When I got angry, I just exploded. There was another incident. There was a coworker who was hired at the same time as me. When he came to work late, I asked him why he was late, but he said it was none of my business. I got so angry at that moment that I punched him. We fought brutally, but my anger didn't go away. So I brought a baseball bat from a sporting equipment store and told him that I would kill him, and he ran away. I calmed down afterwards because I didn't see him anymore, so I went back to working hard again. But he came back with the police. I thought the case would be settled easily because I thought it was just a tiff between co-workers. The man said he wanted to punish me and didn't listen to the department head or the policeman. Eventually, the case was sent to the South Police Station. When I entered the detective's office, I got really scared. I called my brother and he came and tried to persuade them, but it was useless. In the end, the case closed with a $200 fine and a criminal record. I had run-ins with the employees, but I was friends with the married female employees at the store. The married ladies had experienced a lot of things, so they were very understanding about my personality. Because they didn't hold a grudge, I could make amends with them about my temper afterwards by being nice. Then they were okay with me again. I don't know if they talked badly about me behind my back, but I was close with them anyway. Later, when I told them I was getting married, they said they felt sorry for my future wife, and they worried about her. I also knew my temper, so I was worried and thought, will I be able to have a good marriage? There was another reason why I was afraid of getting married. My brother had dated his wife since they were in high school, and he got married even before he graduated from the university, because they loved each other so much. But after they got married, they couldn't have a happy life together. They fought so terribly. When they fought like enemies. Watching them fight, my hope about marriage disappeared. The idea of marriage seemed to drift further and further away from me. But one day, things were totally different when I went to my brother's house. His relationship with his wife had suddenly become great. They were like newlyweds. I said, "What's going on?" I found out that they had been going to Hanmaum Church in Chinchan. I thought, why church? My family believed in Buddhism, and I'd never been to a church in my life. In fact, I hated people who went to church because I thought they were self-centered and fake. When I was in middle school, I once saw church people who had borrowed the school building and had a retreat there. Seeing the people who prayed out loud every night made me scared. I thought that people believed in God only because they had no faith in themselves. I thought they were into religion because they were weak. So I was not a Buddhist, even though my family was Buddhist. However, when I saw my brother change, I thought there must be something to Christianity. So I followed my brother to church. When I first went there, it wasn't as scary as I thought. There was one brother who always stood beside me and told me that Jesus rose from the dead and that this was a fact. He said it was recorded in history. He testified so passionately that I said, "Okay, I believe it, just so I can get out of there." But when I came home, I kept thinking about the resurrection. I thought, how can a man die and live again? And my thinking got very complicated. I called my brother and told him I couldn't believe it. He said that the resurrection is written in the Bible, and that the Bible is history too. He said that I could believe what's written about the great Korean Admiral Lee in history books, even if I didn't live in the same era as he did. So why couldn't I believe in Jesus? It was also written about in history. So I thought, okay, it is historical, so I'll believe it. But then I thought, but still, how can a man die and live again? In April 2003, my brother told me that there was a lady he wanted to introduce to me. I didn't feel confident enough to get married, but I thought I would try meeting her because I trusted my brother. She was a member of Hanmaum Church. When we first met, she talked about a lot of things, but all she talked about was her life of faith. The kind of woman that I disliked the most was a Christian woman who spent all her time at church without caring about home life at all, and I thought maybe she was like that. But when I met her, I felt so comfortable with her, and she was so thoughtful and nice. So I kept meeting her, and in October of that year, we got married. Later, I found out that my wife was a very faithful sister who had a gift for receiving the word and who led newcomers at church very well. She was someone whom everyone in the church respected. They thought she might end up marrying a pastor. If I hadn't known that my wife was that well known in the church, I couldn't have approached her that easily. Before we got married, there was one thing that my future wife always said whenever we talked about marriage. She said that we couldn't get married before I wrote a testimony about my salvation. I was under a lot of pressure because I could not believe in God, but I had to write a testimony about my salvation. So I tried to organize my thoughts. Jesus rose from the dead, and because this is written into history, it is a sure fact. But the reason Jesus rose again was to become our Lord. So then shouldn't I receive him as my boss or something? Okay. Everyone needs a model for their lives. So I would just receive him as my boss and a role model. So I wrote a testimony with the title, Jesus is my boss. Thinking back now, Jesus wasn't God to me at the time. He wasn't completely my master. I just wanted to accept him and follow him as my boss. My life of faith was so hard because my lordship hadn't changed. I tried to follow Jesus as my Lord while I was still my own Lord. So my life as a Christian couldn't help but be difficult. One day, a friend of mine came to my house. My wife shared the gospel with him. Then I also tried to talk to him. He said he couldn't believe, so I said, "It is easy to believe in the resurrection, but it's hard after that. You need to pray a lot and read the Bible. That's hard to do." After he left our house, my wife called me over. She asked me, "Is your Christian life difficult?" I said, "Well, of course. Isn't everyone's?" But my wife said, "No, when I met the risen Jesus, I was joyful and happy from the start. If your Christian life is that hard, how can you tell other people to believe? If it were me, I wouldn't want to believe." I was really surprised. My wife didn't live a difficult Christian life. She lived joyfully and happily, but I was tired. I thought that my wife was at a higher level because she had been a Christian for a long time. And I thought if I tried hard, I could live like that too. But it was not like that. After we got married, my wife established a small church and nurtured disciples, and that was her mission. She did the things that the Christian woman I disliked so much did, but my wife took care of our home, and she treated me the way she treated her Lord, as the Word says. I loved it. My marriage life was so comfortable. I regretted not getting married sooner. My wife wasn't a person who went out much or who enjoyed meeting new people, but she gave 5 small church worship services every week. Because of my work, I can't rest during the weekends, but I rest on the weekdays. So I decided to go with my wife since she wasn't good with directions and had a hard time going to new places. We made a schedule, and we had worship service in the morning and at night. Surprisingly, there was a lot of joy. Of course, the food that my wife made was delicious. But my wife was a novice housewife, so it was delicious with love. But as we gave worship in various places, the veteran housewives made us delicious lunches in their homes. It was so good. I can't forget how good it was even now. I went to the worship services to eat. And it says that faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. So I began to have faith too. My eyes started to open. We went to 5 church services every week and listened to the pastor's Sunday sermons. By the time we got to the last house, my heart was so full of the word, and I was so full of joy that I could even encourage others with the word. My thoughts became simplified as I listened about the risen Jesus more and more. When I went to work, my thinking became complicated, and I was full of thoughts. But as I kept listening to the risen Jesus, my mind became clearer, and it became clear to me how I should live. I could understand what was real and what was false. I knew then what it was to surrender to the risen Jesus. It was about my thoughts and feelings being broken away from me before the risen Jesus. It was only the risen Jesus and his word remaining as truth. That was surrender. The sin of being my own Lord was holding on to my thoughts and feelings, even though Jesus rose again, and even though I said he is Lord. The reason I had a hard time was because I tried to follow Jesus while holding on to my thoughts. I lived my Christian life without changing the Lord of my life. Jesus was not a boss whom I had to try to follow. He was my Lord, who was living with me. Amen. It was about him coming into my heart. So it was not normal to have my thoughts in my heart, but only to have his word in me. I finally understood all of the verses that my wife had shared with me. From then on, I started to live a life of faith that feels good and refreshing, just like my wife's. I worried so much about my married life because of my short temper. But I had no situation or reason to get angry, because my wife treated me as she treated Jesus, and because I was busy going to worship on my days off. And at work, I got angry less and less. At first, I tried to suppress my personality by thinking, I'm a person who goes to church. But it was too hard. But when I started believing in Jesus as my Lord for real, my anger started to fade away, just like my thoughts. I did once explode at work, about 4 years ago. I was angry at my coworker for saying something rude, so I threw the phone. I was punished for that. But what was surprising was my reaction afterwards. If this had happened in the past, I would have been really angry and would have blamed my coworker. But this time I felt so sorry in front of God. I could not lift my head because it was not Jesus, but anger that was in my heart. I repented to God, and I also asked my coworker for forgiveness. After that, I hadn't had any more big explosions at work. Instead, I've been praying for my coworkers, and I've come to understand how big Jesus' love is that embraced me. And more, I'm becoming a person of love at my workplace. My manager, who saw how I'd changed, asked me some time ago during the morning meeting, "Mr. Hong, are you sure of your wife's love for you?" I had no clue why he asked me that question during the meeting, but I answered, "Yes." And he asked me again, "Do you also love your wife?" I answered, "Yes, of course I love her." He asked, "How is that possible?" I was a little embarrassed, but I answered him honestly, "Our Lord is Jesus." We only look at Jesus continuously, and after 10 years, we've come to love each other even more, and our relationship became more new each day. Then my manager said, "People with faith really are different after all," and he asked me how I came to believe. So I started to share about the risen Jesus. There were many other people there too, and they all heard the gospel. On my way home that day, I thought of how fearful I felt about marriage before I believed in Jesus. but 10 years have passed, and I felt like those years were like a dream, because my wife and I haven't fought even once. My son, who heard about my old self during a small church service, asked my wife, "Mom, was Dad really like that before?" For a while, he told everyone he met, "Guess what? My dad used to be like this," and so on. I think it was really surprised. Before I got married, there was one story that my wife's older sister told me. She drew a triangle and said that if the husband and wife just looked at each other, nothing would work. She told me that both of them should only focus on Jesus and give their everything to him, because this would make the husband and wife closer. And after 11 years of marriage, I realized this was true. We both focused on only Jesus and became a husband and wife that even worldly people envy. Our marriage life is more fresh and new today than when we were first married. There is a saying that animals should meet the right master, and I think it is the same for people too. People can live the best life when they meet the right master. Jesus rose from the dead and showed me that he is really the God who created us. Repenting the sin of being my own master and receiving Jesus as my Lord is truly the right way to live. I hadn't been a Christian for long, but the years became like a dream, and after Jesus became the Lord in my heart, and I think it will be the same in the future too. Believing in Jesus was the best thing I've done in my whole life, and the second best thing I ever did was marrying a woman who believes in Jesus. I never imagined that my married life would be this happy. Jesus, you're the Lord of my family, and I love you and thank you. Until we meet again, we will live as a family in faith, who will lead many people to the Lord. Thank you.